think you'd have to be living under like a really big rock to not know about climate change.
Climate researchers from the UN have warned that it's now considerably more likely than not that global warming will breach the key 1.5 degree limit.
The United Nations sounding a red alert over global warming, and this follows a new report that shows every major global climate record was broken last year.
According to a new report, experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe. It also says if unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
There might have been various causes, but like the great mass extinctions of the past, they were generally associated with some form of climate change.
In recent years, I've heard about climate change effects in increased frequency of hurricanes and intensity of hurricanes, wildfires all over the world, Australia, California, Canada. I've experienced here in Michigan, warmer winters, more unpredictable strength of storms, and then because of the increased general warming, the change in the timing of things flowering and things leafing out have been noticeable in the past 20 years or so.
This year in February, we had a day that was 70 degrees and I was out on a deck in the sun in a t-shirt. And like, February is the dead of winter, but it felt like a wonderful day in spring. We live in Michigan. Michigan is kind of like well known for having real cold temperatures, lots of snow. But this last year, it felt like winter almost didn't come. Like there were a couple weeks there that were pretty cold, but like my pond didn't freeze over.
Fossil fuels are bad for the environment. We figured that out with like CO2 emissions, raising global temperatures. In Thailand, I also would talk to my host families all the time about how their agriculture was changing because of the weather patterns changing. So they couldn't grow some of their crops for as long as they usually would, just because they had really hot seasons for way longer than any of the wet or cool seasons.
My focus is a large and beautiful group of plants. They're called Medinilla. In particular, for my master's work, I studied some species on one single mountain, and there was an assemblage of about 11 species there. 2 of them really only flowered at the top 200 meters. And the difference between the top of the mountain and kind of where that 200 meter line is only about 1.5 degrees. The goal is to keep the global climate from warming by 1.5 degrees. And so if it does warm by that kind of average best case scenario, they literally get knocked off the top of the mountain.
Lake levels have been changing. Now they change naturally, but climate change is going to exacerbate that in this area. And so that unpredictability means that plants also can't predict or aren't used to, evolutionary used to the new conditions. And so I think that combined with the threats that I've already seen, which is like shoreline development, an invasive weevil species that eats the seeds. But climate change is really going to make it very difficult to save species and to manage species. We don't understand how ecosystems work really well. And now we're like putting climate change on top of that, which changes everything.
We have more of a need for green and renewable energy as this continues. Starting it now is better than ever, just so that we can maybe offset some of the damage we've already done. Historically, there's already an ebb and flow of heating and cooling of the earth. Because of our consumption levels and like the amount of consumption, we are just exceeding those numbers tenfold.
I think the best place to do either solar or biofuels is on slightly degraded land to rehabilitate the land, or if it's not very productive agriculturally, then put solar panels on it. And if it's a little bit productive, but not productive enough to make really energy-dense foods or good foods, then maybe biofuels would be a good option for that land. Biofuels are think they're crucial for the future as part of a mix of other solutions to climate change. They're not the panacea, they're not a silver bullet. They have to be biofuels and solar and wind and huge amounts of energy efficiency gains with technology. In particular, biofuels are going to be useful to drive internal combustion engines. We're not quite where we can fly an airplane on electricity. So solar and wind are good at making electricity, but they're not good at making an airplane fly. And so there's a niche that we're going to need liquid, energy-dense liquid to burn in engines.
I really believe in diversity, just in general. In an ecological system, the more things you have, the more specialized they are, the better they can kind of tap into the resources around them, the better they can use them, and the more ultimate production can happen. And it's the same sort of thing with energy. If you're just trying to use one source of energy, then you're missing out on a whole lot of other stuff. So I really believe in building out kind of all the avenues of energy and specializing in all these different areas, and then you can really select the best option for your particular location. When the wind isn't blowing, then you have the sun, and when the sun isn't shining, then maybe you have the hydropower, and when the reservoirs aren't full, maybe you have the geothermal. And so if you have all these different kind of independent sources, then that's where you get energy security. So I believe in an energy diverse future. I think that's the way to go.